Good afternoon. Welcome back to Threat Watch, the 15-minute or so podcast from UNFI Cyber, where Fred and I are going to dig into the events of the week and laugh at some of them and recoil in horror at some of them.
Yeah.
And basically talk about, 3 or 4 articles that we picked out of the news blast this week. We're just back from the customer summit, the Lumify Customer Summit in Seattle. That was a great meeting. I'm getting feedback from people that were there, very appreciative of how that went down. And I'll say this again, great job moderating the panel.
Yeah, it was a fantastic event. The weather was perfect. We were right on the lake, and we had fantastic customer engagement. So I thought it was a fantastic event.
Yeah. All right. Let's get going here. We gotta start with this warning that came out from AT&T to their customers. So a while back, we know that 86 million records were stolen from AT&T, and now they're for sale on Russian cybercrime forums. So you are at elevated risk for fraud, and the guidance is to keep an eye on your credit, like lock it down, and change your credentials for access to any AT&T portals. Where my mind goes is, they can SIM swap you, and then they're going to get every account you have with password resets, right? It's like all of the information that AT&T has about you that they would use to verify you is now in the hands of all the criminals. So
yeah,
I don't know if there's more to say about it than that.
Well, I think it's fascinating that we have shifted from, okay, my records are stolen. Well, like I said at the Secure Summit, all my personal information is available for $45 on about 10 dark websites, literally. I mean, anybody can get my information for $45.
I already know.
Yeah, okay, there you go. So what it really boils down to is what you're saying, lock your credit. All those things are now becoming absolutely critical to protecting yourself.
Yeah. And frankly, I think some of these services that, remove your personal information from the web so that people can't get that little bit of a toehold, by buying data from a data broker to try and SIM swap you and things like that, that needs to be a bigger thing too. We need to, and this is what we said at the summit, we need to not be so worried about the theft of records, but the distribution of them, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that. AT&T people, change your passwords, lock your credit. All right. So when we did the summit too, we did a Threat Lab Live. We're going to recreate that next week. We talked about the scattered spider gang going after retail and the fact that they concentrate on a single sector at a time for the most part. So we saw them hitting retail in the UK. Now, as well as a number of other organizations in the US, retail organizations in the US, Victoria's Secret comes to mind.
Yep.
They hit United Natural Foods, right? UNFI. And this has affected food inventory for a number of brands. You see this?
I did. And I think if most people haven't put it together, Whole Foods equal Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
You start wondering then too, is Whole Foods segmented off the same way a regular customer from Amazon's AWS infrastructure might be? Or is there some back end passwords and administrators that work in both environments and there's a potential bigger threat? That's pure speculation. But they're trying to get back, it's going to take them at least 2 weeks, right, to get stuff back on the shelves, apparently. Clear disruption. There's co-op right in the EU that got hit. It took, I think, 3 or 4 weeks for them to recover.
Yeah, that was a month easy, yeah.
Yeah. And these guys are number 1 top grocery carrier and number 14 on the top 100 largest private carriers overall. So again, is this yet another way they're poking to find a way to disrupt our lives, our infrastructure? Is it a precursor to a much larger, broader attack across a whole bunch of areas? If something happens between, let's say, Israel and Iran. Say something
happening now.
It's happening right now.
It's happening right now. They bombed them. No.
That's right. So we might find out. We may get answers sooner than we think. Okay.
Yeah. Right. So this is hitting Americans right in the just-in-time delivery that we've all become addicted to, right? So as a result, inventory logistics are going to be messed up for a lot of retailers. They're going to have to respin everything up again, right? What's the rate that we need the product coming in, et cetera. It sounds like ransomware, but no talk about records. So that's interesting. UNFI did say that payroll would be unaffected. So there are some systems not having to do with logistics and transportation and trucking and things like that that are apparently not affected. My guess is they're going to get out of this without paying a ransom, and they won't get a class action suit for losing PII. So it's probably the best outcome for them. Now, I don't know what kind of negotiations are going on. Maybe they did pay for a decryption key. If they had a good resilience plan in place, they know that that's not the most parsimonious way to get their network back, right? It's to use immutable backups and a good process, right? The other thing is there hasn't been any attribution, but to your point, this looks like state directed or at least state informed targeting against the food and ag sector. Okay. Because you remember when the Colonial Pipeline problem happened, and then right after that, it was JBS Meats, right? And that
Yes. Yep.
happened right before Memorial Day, right? So they punched us right in the barbecues and the driving. All right. That is destabilizing for the
Yeah.
United
Well, that's
States.
un-American is what that is.
Yeah, well, this is starting to look like a little bit of a replay of that, right?
Yeah.
But it's hard to say because this scattered spider gang does go after retail.
Right.
I don't think they would have preferentially picked this particular retail because this is more about food distribution than it is about trying to extort someone. And it looks like at least today, with information we have, looks like extortion is not going to work.
Yeah.
Right?
I can't wait for for Amazon to tell us exactly what happened, because there is some interesting lessons to be learned here. One is, why weren't they able to immediately get back online from the massive resources that Amazon has? You'd think if anybody can recover within hours or days, probably should be somebody that's an Amazon company.
That's a
So
really good point.
yeah, I can't wait I mean, I'm holding my breath. Can't wait to find out.
How
But
come you couldn't just fail over in AWS?
right,
Right.
you need to move from US West to US East. Why didn't
Right, I
that
hadn't
happen?
thought about that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they don't use an AWS. Who knows?
Maybe. So
Yeah,
let's
all right.
let's talk about another one. This is one that I thought was real interesting, Mike. It's the fog ransomware attack on Asian financial organizations. And
Yes.
what was utterly fascinating about this, they attacked a financial institution in Asia. Um, and what was interesting was the novel attack techniques. For example, they were using a legitimate, employed by the company, employee monitoring software, okay, called Sateca. And they're also using some uncommon, although I think soon to be much more common, pen testing tools like GC2, and I'll explain what that is in a minute, marking the first time we're seeing these in ransomware. So what does this mean? Well, there's a lot of thought here that because there was a long time persistence, they believe, in this attack, it was much more related to espionage and stealing information, as opposed to probably somebody ultimately launching a ransomware attack. So very interesting. The things that I find fascinating is we continue to create the instruments of our own destruction. We've built a system that apparently can see just about anything and everything in the network. It's like SolarWinds; it sees everything, right? And yet,
Including keystrokes, right?
yeah, exactly. Everything that's happening on the screen, right? And the thing that frightens me here is who are the people operating this system? Is it the information security pros that know that, with heightened access, you have to have a lot stronger controls and more awareness? Or is it HR? I'm not trying to put down HR here, folks, but you haven't been steeped in this like us InfoSec pros and know what to look out. So that is handing the keys to the kingdom, maybe to a group that needs more training. But let me put it that way: it needs more training before they
Nice choice
are
of
using
words.
something. Yeah. Then the use of GC2, right? So that is a tool that used Google Cloud to exfiltrate data. It was using Google Sheets and a couple of those things. But now, this week, and I'm pairing these two thoughts together, Google Calendar is now the first time being used for CNC and data exfiltration.
I saw that.
Yeah. So, and this goes back to what we talked about at the summit as well. And I like to dispel a notion that people have. People think detecting data exfiltration should be the easiest thing we do. And in fact, it's the hardest. please, people, it is so difficult to effectively find when, especially APTs are exfiltrating data. It's not like, hey, we lost, 2 terabytes of data. How could you not see that? Well, because we're leaking it out through 7 or 8 different channels, Google, DNS, all these
Hmm.
things. You can move data out through all these ways, and they know to do that to fly under the radar. So I want people to understand, well, dispel the notion that data exfiltration is easy to detect. What do you think about all this, Mike?
Well, I mean, so to your point there, the way that they do that is they bleed it out so slowly that it just, it's not only using protocols that are nominally extant on the network anyway, but they're doing it at such a rate where it's slow and it's not periodic, right? If it was periodic, it was burst, 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 something like that, that's detectable. But when you're using, DNX text records or, Google Calendar messages or stuff like that, I mean, they were using Twitter for a while,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? Yeah, that is it's not impossible to find, and that's why AI models are being trained up to detect things like that, right? I would say though that being able to alert on the let's call it aberrational use of a tool on the network, like employee monitoring software, that should have been detected, right? I mean, seriously, you can baseline, what's the average behavior of, how is this tool used, who uses it, et cetera, et cetera. And then those anomalies should have gone off. So I think that's the kind of thing we can detect. To your point, right? We are creating the tools of our own destruction. And as soon as they get out in the hands of the bad guys, they're going to be used against us. And it's the same thing with the back doors that they want to put in phones and things like that. You're not the only one that's going to use those, law
Exactly.
enforcement. They're going to be found by everybody else.
Yeah, like the
And
Chinese
yeah, like the
who are
Chinese
currently doing it.
or the crime gangs, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm looking forward to hear whose access was compromised. And if it was HR, then this was pre-programmed, it was going to happen, and I agree with you. HR using a tool like that is probably within their swim lane, but this is a tool that needs elevated access and elevated monitoring for something like that, setting aside all the creepy, privacy violation stuff that a lot of people are pushing back on right now. I read recently that not monitoring your employees actually makes them more productive,
Yeah. Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Because they're all sandbagging. They're all
Yeah.
figuring out ways
Exactly.
around this stuff anyway.
Yeah.
I think, frankly, I always like go to the government, right? They might want to look at regulating these types of surveillance tools. You know, um, not less necessarily saying you can't use them, but put appropriate boundaries around how they're used. You know, and this stuff is starting to show up everywhere too, and especially it's prevalent in schools,
Yes.
right? I mean, schools do creepy monitoring way worse than
Yeah.
employee monitoring. And there's been a lot of pushback on that too, because the company that provides the software also has access to the events, and they go through and they investigate. And if they think, hey, this looks like this is going to be bullying, or there's, potentially a suicide risk here, they raise the flag. The false positive rate on that is such that it doesn't paint a good picture of the efficacy of these tools. So I'm sure we're going to end up coming back to that. I want to change channels though. Um, I want to talk about some good news from CISA. Okay, so the House set the CISA budget cut at $135 million and not the $495 million that the president wanted. So that's good. And again, I think Congress is looking to redirect CISA to focus on flattening out the regulatory environment so everybody doesn't get a different set of requirements to meet. We all got to do the same thing. I think that's good. And possibly administering an extension to the state local cyber grant program. So, all of our like freaking out about, oh, we're losing CISA might not be as bad as we thought it was going to be. And I will say too, there's a bill in front of the House right now to improve healthcare cyber, and it has roles for CISA in there, right? So they can't enforce regulations. DHS can't do that, But what they can do is provide assistance. And they're talking about using CISA to provide very specialized assistance to the healthcare sector, specifically rural healthcare, in a lot of ways because of their just inability to bring qualified practitioners into those organizations. So I think that's good news. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I think it's great that they're retaining 75% of the budget. I think also what is interesting is they have already done the 1,000-person layoff,
Yeah,
and they have
yeah,
actually hit the bigger number. I forget how 400 billion I think was the number, something like, or million. I'm sorry, was the number originally, and they've actually hit that budget cutting number. So the question becomes is now that this money's back there, is it they're going to rehire people? Are they going to change where they spend the money? We don't know exactly where that money's going to go because it was originally going to these people, and these people are no longer there.
yeah.
So it's really hard to figure out. But this is good. It's good news, no matter what. This is good news. But there's a couple of things we've lost in this process, right? EU is now building their own CVSS scoring system. Anybody I talk to in the business says, well, we just can't rely on the US anymore. So we're going to move all our stuff to the EU system, right? So we're not going to be leading there anymore because we put our foot in our mouth. And the thing that I really hope, if they're going to fund anything, at least have the known exploited vulnerabilities list, the KEV. That is critically useful. When I go and explain, for example, to non-technical people that you have to patch this, it is probably because it's exposed on the internet. It is an incident waiting to happen. I need something like this to back that up. So it's not just me telling them hey, this is a known thing. The government is telling you this is happening. So it provided multiple values, not just letting you know what they're doing, but giving you a way to go justify this to management that you have to do these things.
Right. And prioritize. We need to drop what we're doing, right? We know this thing gets popped. It's hanging out there. We got to do something about this. Yeah. Well, so it does look, again, based on this healthcare legislation I read this morning, it is interesting that the bill is a clone of a Senate bill that was dropped in July last year and went nowhere. It's an absolute clone of it. So maybe they're getting serious about this, but it does look like they want CISA to take on the responsibilities of the sector risk management agencies. Okay, again, not enforce, but provide assistance to meet those. And I just wonder if you talked about they've already done their cuts. They've lost a lot of leadership and key skill sets, we'll call them. And so I'm just wondering if they're going to try and bring some of that back now, because I mean, just I know our folks here in Washington State, right, FEMA Region 10, and our leadership decided to take the payout and leave.
Yeah.
And so other people have been elevated into leadership, which is good. I know those people; they are good. But I'm just wondering if they're going to make a move like a bunch of other agencies have and hire people back. We're just going to have to find out. Okay, I think enough of that. Before we leave, I do want to talk about an update on the Russia-Ukraine cybering and some of the other geopolitical things going on in the world, because man, it's heating up.
Ooh.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So so Russia, the latest target that Ukraine hit is a telecommunication provider in Siberia, Orion Telecom. Okay. And their networks were used to carry out attacks against Ukraine. So they creamed them with a DDoS attack and probably other techniques that they haven't reported on. And now there's this closed city in Siberia that does a lot of Russian uranium mining, and they are completely cut off, no communication. Can you imagine being in Siberia and not having access to any communication?
Yikes.
Oh man, talk about a miserable life, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But and this is not the only thing going on in the world. Hey man,
Yeah.
we could talk about other ones going on. Or what do you think? I mean, are we full-blown cyber war at this point? I can think of
Yeah.
3 different conflicts going on that don't even involve us.
Yeah. So this is a fascinating one because there's so many people that it's one of those things where everybody had a motive to commit the murder, right? It's everybody had a great motive, right? So is it hacktivists? Maybe. Is it nation state? Well, it's fascinating because the original, let's say, motivation or parent motivation was to DDoS this network that had been attacking Ukraine. But what did it do? It ended up impacting a significant part of the defense infrastructure, critical defense infrastructure in Russia, or an energy infrastructure in Russia. So is that unintended win, if you will, for the Ukrainians, or is that actually what they were trying to do in the first place, or one of the objectives of that in the first place? So really another one, fascinating. As we've learned more, we'll probably understand it a little better. But it's not, that's not the only thing, right? That Ukraine has been after. It's been after Russian customs. It went after their tax services. It's gone after their railways, right? And one of the affected services called Contour with the K, Russian spelling, they developed like business software and things like that.
Yep.
They were part of it, and as well as a electronic signature server was also. So
That just brings a whole lot of services to their knees
this
would be dependent on that. Yeah.
yeah, I mean this sounds too well planned to be a hacktivist operation, in my opinion. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah. I think the only thing that would suggest that it was a hacktivist operation is the fact they used DDoS, right? And that's a blunt force instrument. It's not very sophisticated. It's not used for espionage. It's not really a nation state tactic. But if you're trying to keep fingerprints off things, maybe that's the false flaggery. Okay. So network-based government services are being hit. This is going to drive up dissatisfaction with the Russian government, if it could get any more dissatisfied with the Russian government. And it does sound like that's the objective when you talk about this collection of things getting hit. Hitting the railroad gets closer to critical infrastructure, and this is extra destabilizing. It's good to see Ukraine fight back and notch some wins here, but I'm afraid there's going to be a blowback. And we've already seen energy in Ukraine targeted. We've seen water being targeted more. So they've already done it. And the Ukrainians are really good at fending off these attacks, and they have a lot of help from the EU and what formerly us. But I see the gloves coming off here. And just let's put a coda on this. And I'll say that China and Taiwan are now getting into the same escalating attacks. And that is very troubling. China is also, to involve us, also reported to be very active in compromising U.S. critical sectors. In the last report from Sentinel-1, right? Remember, China tried to break into them. They stopped them, and then they started really doing a deep dive investigation. We found out that the Chinese have succeeded in gaining access to about 70 organizations, all of which are kind of critical services. Okay. And on top of that, Israel and Iran are now going after it as well. And Iran never had gloves. Okay. The bombing that just happened, there's going to be blowback from this.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the thing people need to keep in mind is blowback will hit all of us, even if it's just Russia, Ukraine, or China, Taiwan, or Iran, Israel. We are still going to be hit. We're in a globalized society, globalized supply chain, connected systems all over the world. Don't think that because they're happening over there, that they're not going to still have blowback that's going to land in our lap. So we need to get out of here, Mike. Hopefully you got something that will either make us laugh or terrify us even further.
Okay. All right. Like, I want to go back to the movie plots, right? Because like this stuff just keeps coming out. The gift that keeps on giving, right?
Yeah.
So you remember we talked about the Chinese robot dogs that could be taken over as a network of dogs and then instructed to do whatever. Okay. Well, here's one about a robot that was on the assembly line in China, a humanoid robot.
Yeah.
It was on the assembly line and it went rogue while it was being constructed, right? Thrashing around, kicking, scared the hell out of the engineers there during the setup, right? Again, this is right out of iRobot.
Yeah.
So, these events are starting to create this brand new wave of anxiety about the rise of intelligent machines, okay? Now, at this point, we can only hope that Skynet does not become self-aware.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. We got to get out of here. Sign up for the daily InfoSec Insider News Blast, and you would already have read all these articles. Watch the site for events. And Fred, see you next week.
All right. Talk to you then.
All
Bye.
right. Bye.